Wow, what an incredible journey, heart-wrenching yet hopeful. Claire and Luke's story shows the power of second chances, resilience, and growing together through hardship. It's beautifully written, full of emotion and growth, and that ending, it felt so earned. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you reading this today? The old bus pulled into Red Hollow, just as the afternoon sun was starting to sink. Claire Marino gripped her backpack straps tighter as the bus wheezed to a stop at the small town station. She was the only passenger to step off. Last stop, Red Hollow, the driver called out, barely looking at her. Claire nodded and stepped onto the cracked pavement. The bus pulled away, leaving her standing alone. At 28, she'd never felt more lost or more determined. She needed to be somewhere, anywhere that wasn't back there with him. Red Hollow wasn't much to look at. A main street with a handful of shops, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and houses scattered across rolling hills. Claire had picked it randomly from a map, a place so small that no one would think to look for her here. She adjusted her backpack and started walking. Her hands were rough and calloused from years of hard work. The physical pain had faded, but every time a car drove by too fast or someone spoke too loudly, she flinched. Some wounds didn't show on the outside. "You looking for something specific?" asked an older woman sweeping the sidewalk in front of the general store. Claire shook her head. "Just passing through." The woman frowned. "Not much passing through to be done in Red Hollow, honey. We're the end of the line." Claire managed a small smile and kept walking. She didn't have a plan beyond getting away. Money was tight, enough for a meal and maybe a night at whatever passed for a motel in this town. After that, she'd have to figure something out. She followed the road as it curved out of town. The buildings grew fewer and the land opened up. Fields stretched out on either side, some with neat rows of crops, others with grazing animals. The open space made something in Claire's chest loosen just a little. The sun was getting lower when she came upon a large farm at the edge of town. A wooden sign read Harrington Farm in faded letters. The property stretched far into the distance, of corn and wheat. A red barn and a modest farmhouse with a wraparound porch. Claire found herself drawn to it. She walked along the fence line, taking in the peaceful scene. Chickens pecked at the ground near a coop. A dog slept in the shade of an oak tree. It was so different from the cramped apartment she'd fled, so open, so free. Her legs suddenly felt weak. 3 days of travel, minimal sleep, and the constant fear of being followed had taken their toll. She sat down heavily on a fence post, letting her backpack drop to the ground. That's when the tears came. She hadn't allowed herself to cry since she'd left, but now they flowed freely. Claire covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching from behind. "You're right there?" a deep voice asked. Claire jumped up, stumbling backward. Her heart hammered in her chest as she faced the stranger. He was tall, maybe 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. He wore worn jeans and a faded work shirt with dirt stains. In one hand, he held a straw hat. "I'm sorry," Claire said quickly, wiping her eyes. "I didn't mean to trespass. I was just resting." The man didn't move any closer. He seemed to sense her fear. "No harm done," he said, his voice low and steady. "This fence gets plenty of sitters. Best view in the county." His eyes were kind but cautious, like he'd seen his share of hard times. "Too, I should go," Claire said, reaching for her backpack. "You got somewhere to be?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. She didn't have anywhere to be. That was the whole problem. The man studied her for a moment. "I'm Luke Harrington. This is my farm." "Claire," she replied, not offering her last name. Luke nodded, accepting the partial introduction. "You're running from something, Claire." The directness of the question startled her. She stiffened, ready to deny it, ready to run, but something in his expression stopped her. There was no judgment there, just a quiet understanding. "I should go," she repeated, unable to answer his question. Luke took a step closer, moving slowly, like he might approach a skittish animal. "Then stop running," he said, his voice so soft she almost didn't hear him. "Stay here and build a future with me." Claire stared at him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Luke said. "I know what it looks like when someone's been hurt, and I know what it looks like when someone's trying to start over." Claire looked away. "I don't need charity." "Good, because I'm not offering any," Luke replied. "Farm needs help. Harvest season's coming. I could use an extra pair of hands. Got a room above the barn that's just collecting dust. It's yours if you want to work for it." Claire hesitated. It sounded too good to be true, and life had taught her that things that sounded too good to be true usually were. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked. Luke put his hat back on, shielding his eyes from the setting sun. "Sometimes people helped me when I needed it. Sometimes they didn't," he shrugged. "Your choice. Job's there if you want it. No strings." He turned and started walking back toward the farmhouse, giving her space to decide. Claire watched him go. She could keep moving, find the local motel, figure out her next step, or she could stay, at least for a little while. A roof over her had work that would keep her busy and out of her own thoughts. "Wait," she called after him. "What kind of work?" Luke turned back. "Whatever needs doing. Can you handle farm work?" Claire looked down at her calloused hands. Yes, I'm stronger than I look. Never doubted it, Luke said. Come on then, sun's going down, and Martha gets cranky if dinner's late. Martha, Claire asked, suddenly wary again. My dog, Luke clarified, old border collie. Only female who stuck with me through everything. A small smile tugged at Claire's lips despite herself. She picked up her backpack and followed Luke toward the farmhouse, keeping a careful distance between them. The farmhouse was simple but well maintained. A large porch wrapped around the front, with 2 rocking chairs facing the fields. Luke led her past the house to a large red barn. A wooden staircase ran up the outside to a small door. Rooms up there, Luke said, pointing. It's not fancy, but it's clean. Bathrooms down here in the barn. You can use the kitchen in the main house for cooking. Claire nodded, taking it all in. And the work will start tomorrow, Luke said. Get some rest tonight. You look like you could use it. Claire couldn't argue with that. She felt dead on her feet. Thank you, she said quietly. Luke just nodded. There's some food in the fridge. Help yourself. I'll be in the house if you need anything. He walked away, giving her privacy to settle in. Claire climbed the stairs to the room above the barn. It was simple, a bed with clean sheets, a small dresser, a chair by the window that overlooked the fields, but it was more than she'd hoped for when she'd stepped off that bus. Claire set her backpack down and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to safe. The next morning, Claire woke to the sound of roosters crowing. She jolted upright, momentarily confused about where she was. The events of the previous day came flooding back, and she took a deep breath. She was in Red Hollow, on a farm, away from him. She dressed quickly in jeans and a t-shirt, the most practical clothes she had, and headed downstairs. Outside, the farm was already alive with activity. Luke was in the chicken coop, collecting eggs. Morning, he called when he saw her sleep okay. Claire nodded. What can I do to help? Luke seemed pleased by her eagerness to work. Breakfast first, can't work on an empty stomach. In the farmhouse kitchen, Luke moved with surprising ease for a man his size. He scrambled eggs and made toast, setting a plate in front of Claire without ceremony. Coffee, he offered. Please, Claire said. She hadn't had a proper meal in days, and her stomach growled loudly. Luke poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from her at the kitchen table. So, you know farm work? Claire nodded, her mouth full of eggs. After swallowing, she said, I grew up on a farm, smaller than this, but I know the basics. Luke seemed satisfied with that. Good, less I have to teach you. They ate in companionable silence. Claire appreciated that Luke didn't press her for details. He didn't ask where she'd come from or why she'd left. It was a relief not to have to lie or explain. After breakfast, Luke showed her around the farm. It was larger than it had looked from the road. 50 acres of crops, a vegetable garden in the house, chickens, a few goats, and 2 horses in a paddock. Farm's been in my family for 3 generations, Luke explained as they walked. My grandfather built it up. My father nearly drank it away, and I've been trying to bring it back ever since. You run it alone? Claire asked. Luke nodded. Hire seasonal help for harvest, but day to day, it's just me and Martha. As if on cue, the old border collie trotted up to them, eyeing Claire with curiosity. She won't bite, Luke assured her, unless you're a wayward sheep. Claire cautiously reached out to pet the dog, who sniffed her hand and then allowed the contact. She likes you, Luke observed. She's a good judge of character. Claire wasn't so sure about that, but she didn't argue. They started with the vegetable garden. Luke showed her which plants needed harvesting and which needed weeding. The familiar work of digging in the soil was soothing to Claire. She lost herself in it, grateful for the physical labor that kept her mind occupied. Luke worked nearby, giving her space but staying close enough if she had questions. He moved with purpose, his hands sure and steady. You ever grow tomatoes before? He asked after a while. Claire nodded. We had a garden when I was growing up. Tomatoes, peppers, beans. These ones need staking, Luke said, handing her some wooden stakes and twine. They're getting too heavy for their own good. Claire took the supplies and got to work. The morning passed in peaceful productivity. By lunchtime, her muscles ached, but it was a good kind of pain, the kind that came from creation rather than destruction. They ate sandwiches on the porch, watching a distant storm roll across the valley. Claire couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so at peace. Thank you, she said suddenly, for giving me a chance. Luke looked at her, his expression serious. Everyone deserves a chance, Claire. Some just need it more than others. Something in his words made her throat tight. She looked away, blinking back unexpected tears. After lunch, Luke showed her how to milk the goats. Claire's first attempts were clumsy, and the goat, an ornery creature named Daisy, seemed unimpressed with her technique. Like this, Luke demonstrated, his hands gentle but firm. You have to be confident. They can sense if you're nervous. Claire tried again, mimicking his motions. This time, milk streamed steadily into the bucket. There you go, Luke said, the corner of his mouth lifting in what might have been a smile. You're a natural. The simple praise warmed Claire more than it should have. They moved on to mending a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. Luke showed her how to secure the wire properly. his calloused hands working quickly and efficiently. My father used to say a farm is only as good as its fences, Luke said as they worked. One of the few useful things he taught me. You don't talk about him much, Claire observed. Luke was quiet for a moment, not much to say. He was a hard man who got harder after my mother died. The bottle became his best friend, and everything else including the farm and me came second. I'm sorry, Claire said softly. Luke shrugged. It was a long time ago. He's been gone 5 years now, and you've been here alone all that time. Me and Martha, Luke corrected. And the farm. It's enough. But something in his voice made Claire wonder if that was true. As the afternoon wore on, clouds rolled in, bringing with them the smell of rain. They finished the fence just as the first drops began to fall. Perfect timing, Luke said, gathering the tools. Let's get inside before it really starts coming down. They hurried back to the farmhouse, the rain picking up as they reached the porch. Inside, Luke put on a pot of coffee while Claire stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly aware that she was in his personal space. You can sit, Luke said, nodding toward the kitchen table. No need to stand on ceremony here. Claire sat, wrapping her hands around the mug of coffee he placed in front of her. The rain pattered against the windows, a soothing soundtrack. Tell me about the farm, she said, wanting to keep the conversation on neutral ground. What do you grow? Luke sat across from her, seeming relieved at the safe topic. Corn and wheat mostly. Some alfalfa for the animals. The vegetable garden is mainly for personal use, though I sell some at the farmer's market in town when there's extra. Is it enough? Claire asked. To make a living. I mean, Luke considered this. It's not making me rich, but it's enough. The farm's paid for. I keep the lights on and food on the table. He took a sip of his coffee. There's something to be said for that kind of security. Security, the word hung in the air between them. Claire hadn't felt secure in a very long time. What about you? Luke asked carefully. What kind of work did you do before? Claire tensed. Different things. Waitressing, waitail, whatever paid the bills. Luke nodded, not pushing for more. Well, farm work is steady. At least, not easy, but steady. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof. Martha came to lie at Luke's feet, her old bones apparently sensing the weather change. Storms setting in, Luke observed. Might be a good evening to take it easy. There are some books in the living room if you like to read. I do, Claire said. Thank you. They finished their coffee, and Luke showed her to a small bookshelf in the living room. It was a modest collection, some farming manuals, a few classics, and what looked like well-worn paperback westerns. My mother's books, Luke explained. Seeing her examine a copy of Jane Eyre she loved to read, said it took her places when the farm kept her rooted. Claire ran her fingers over the worn spine. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was, Luke agreed, a softness coming into his voice. She would have liked you. The simple statement caught Claire off guard. Before she could respond, Luke cleared his throat. I need to check on the animals before the storm gets worse. Make yourself at home. There's leftover stew in the fridge for dinner. He grabbed a raincoat from a hook by the door and headed out into the downpour, leaving Claire alone in his house. It struck her how much trust he was placing in her, a complete stranger. Claire selected Jane Eyre from the shelf and curled up in an armchair by the window. Outside she could see Luke moving through the rain, making sure the animals were secure. He moved with purpose, checking each pen and shelter methodically. As she watched him, Claire felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her, something like hope. Maybe, just maybe, Red Hollow could be more than just another place to run through. Maybe it could be a place to catch her breath. She opened the book to the first page and began to read, the rain providing a gentle backdrop to the familiar words. For the first time in months, Claire allowed herself to think beyond surviving just one more day. It was a small beginning, but it was something. The days fell into a rhythm. Claire woke early, worked alongside Luke during the day, and spent evenings reading or helping in the kitchen. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found her body growing stronger, her mind clearer. Luke was true to his word. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry into her past. He gave her space when she needed it and company when she seemed to want it. They worked well together, developing an easy rapport built on shared tasks and quiet respect. A week passed, then two. Claire began to learn the patterns of the farm, when to harvest which vegetables, how to tell when the goats were feeling ornery, which chickens laid the best eggs. One morning, Luke found her in the vegetable garden picking tomatoes. You've got a good eye for the ripe ones, he commented. Claire smiled. They're not so different from the ones I grew up with. It was the first personal information she'd volunteered, and Luke seemed to recognize the significance. He knelt beside her, helping to fill the basket. Where was that? He asked casually, keeping his focus on the tomatoes. Claire was quiet for so long that Luke probably thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she said, Oklahoma. Small farm, smaller than this. My parents grew wheat mostly. Luke nodded. Good farming. Country Oklahoma it was. Claire agreed. Until the drought hit and the bank took everything. Luke looked at her then, his eyes full of understanding. That happens too often. My father nearly lost this place more than once. My parents moved to the city after that, Claire continued, surprising herself with her willingness to share. My father got work in construction. It was ... different. Different isn't always bad, Luke offered. No, Claire agreed. But it wasn't the same. They both missed the land, and you, Luke asked, did you miss it too? Claire's hand stilled. On a tomato, yes, she said softly. I missed it every day. Something passed between them in that moment of recognition. A connection forged in shared understanding. Luke cleared his throat. Well, you're back on the land now, for as long as you want to be. Claire looked around at the thriving garden, at the fields beyond, at the open sky above. Yes, she said. I suppose I am. They continued picking tomatoes in companionable silence, but something had shifted. Claire had opened a door, just a crack, and found that it wasn't as frightening as she had feared. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Luke said, Town's having its summer festival this weekend. Might be nice for you to see more of Red Hollow than just this farm. Claire tensed. I don't know. I'm not good with crowds. It's hardly a crowd, Luke assured her. Maybe 100 people at most. Good food though. Music, dancing if you're inclined. Claire wasn't inclined, but she didn't say so. Would you go too? I usually make an appearance, Luke said. Buy a pie at the auction. Say hello to neighbors. Don't stay long. Claire considered it. Part of her wanted to stay in the safety of the farm, but another part that was growing stronger each day wanted to see more of this place that was becoming a refuge. Okay, she said finally. I'll go, but I can't promise I'll stay long either. Luke's smile was small but genuine. Fair enough. As Claire lay in bed that night, listening to the crickets through her open window, she realized something important she hadn't thought about running in days. For the first time since she'd fled her old life, she was thinking about staying instead. It was a small shift, but a significant one. And as she drifted off to sleep, Claire wondered what other changes might be waiting just around the corner in Red Hollow. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for the Red Hollow Summer Festival. Claire stood in front of the small mirror in her room above the barn, trying to make herself presentable. She didn't have much to work with, just the clothes she'd brought in her backpack. She settled on her least-worn jeans and a simple blue t-shirt. There was a knock at the door downstairs. Claire tensed momentarily, then reminded herself it was just Luke. She was safe here. Coming, she called, giving her reflection one last, uncertain look before heading down. Luke waited at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt. His hair was combed, and he'd shaved. Claire realized it was the first time she'd seen him looking so ... put together. Ready? He asked, his eyes taking in her appearance. Claire fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. I don't have anything fancy to wear. You look fine, Luke assured her. It's just a small-town festival, not a black-tie affair. They drove into town in Luke's old pickup truck. Claire sat close to the passenger door, watching the landscape roll by. Red Hollow looked different in the daylight, smaller, but also friendlier somehow. Colorful banners hung across Main Street, and people were setting up booths in the town square. It's not much, Luke said as he parked the truck, but folks around here look forward to it all year. It looks nice, Claire said, and meant it. There was something charming about the simple decorations and the obvious community effort. They walked toward the festival, keeping a respectful distance between them. Claire noticed people glancing their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. Luke nodded at several townspeople but didn't stop to chat. Everyone's looking at us, Claire murmured. Not used to seeing me with company, Luke explained. I'm not exactly the social type. That makes two of us, Claire said, trying not to shrink under the attention. The festival was centered around the town square, a grassy area with a gazebo. In the middle, booths lined the perimeter, selling everything from homemade jams to handcrafted jewelry. A band was setting up in the gazebo, testing microphones and tuning instruments. Let me show you around, Luke offered. They walked slowly through the festival. Luke pointed out various landmarks and introduced Claire to a few people, though he was careful to introduce her simply as Claire, who was helping out at the farm. Without any further explanation, Claire was grateful for his discretion. She smiled politely at the introductions but didn't volunteer any information about herself. Most people seemed to pick up on her reserve and didn't press. They stopped at a food booth run by a plump, cheerful woman named Ellie, who Luke explained owned the local diner. Luke Harrington, as I live and breathe, Ellie exclaimed. Haven't seen you in town for weeks, and you've brought a friend. This is Claire, Luke said. Claire, this is Ellie, best cook in the county. Oh, stop, Ellie said, clearly pleased. Just for that, you get extra ribs. Both of you. She heaped food onto 2 paper plates, barbecue ribs, corn on the cob, and coleslaw. Claire's stomach rumbled at the smell. Thank you, she said, accepting the plate. They found a spot under a large oak tree and sat on the grass to eat. The food was delicious, and Claire realized she was hungrier than she'd thought. Good, right? Luke asked, watching her clean her plate. Claire nodded. Really good. The band started playing country classics that had several couples getting up to dance in front of the gazebo. Claire watched them, feeling a strange mix of envy and unease. It had been a long time since she'd allowed herself to have fun like that. So what do you think of Red Hollow? Luke asked, setting his empty plate aside. Claire considered the question. It's nice, peaceful. Everyone seems to know each other. They do, Luke confirmed. Sometimes that's good, sometimes not so much. No secrets in a town this size. Claire stiffened slightly. I suppose not. Luke seemed to realize his mistake. But folks here mind their own business. For the most part, they're good people. Before Claire could respond, a shadow fell across them. Luke looked up and his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Harrington, said a man standing over them. He was around Luke's age but dressed expensively, with a crisp shirt and designer jeans. Didn't expect to see you here, Vance. Luke nodded coolly. Festivals open to everyone. Vance's gaze shifted to Claire, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. And who's this lovely lady? Claire, Luke said, his voice flat. Claire, this is Richard Vance. His family owns the bank, and half the county, Vance added with a smirk. But Luke here won't sell, no matter how many times I make an offer. Stubborn as his old man, there was an edge to Vance's friendly tone that Claire immediately distrusted. She remained silent, not wanting to engage. Not selling today either, Luke said, standing up. If you'll excuse us. Vance held up his hands in mock surrender. No business talk at the festival. I know, but my offer still stands. That land would make a perfect development opportunity. Not interested, Luke said firmly. Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, think about it. Everyone has a price. Harrington. His gaze lingered on Claire again. Everyone. He walked away, leaving an uncomfortable tension in his wake. Sorry about that, Luke muttered, collecting their empty plates. Who was he? Claire asked. Richard Vance. His family's been trying to buy up all the farms around here for years. They want to build some fancy resort or something. And you won't sell. Luke looked at her, his expression serious. That land's been in my family for generations. It's not just dirt and crops. It's ... everything. Claire nodded, understanding completely. I get it. Luke's expression softened. I know you do. The moment was interrupted by an announcement that the pie auction was about to begin. Luke glanced toward the gazebo. We should head over. I promised to buy a pie, remember? They joined the crowd gathering around the auction table. At least 24 pies were on display. Golden apple, ruby cherry, crumbly peach cobblers. An older man with a booming voice served as the auctioneer. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some fine baking here today. All proceeds go to the Red Hollow Fire Department. Let's start the bidding. The auction moved quickly, with good-natured competition driving up the prices. Luke waited patiently, watching as pie after pie was sold. Finally, a chocolate cream pie came up for bid. My mother's favorite, he said quietly to Claire. Luke joined the bidding, raising his hand a few times. When the price hit $40, most bidders dropped out. Only Luke and Richard Vance remained. 50, Vance called out, looking directly at Luke. 60, Luke counted, his jaw set. Vance smirked. 75. A murmur went through the crowd. That was far more than any pie had gone for so far. Luke hesitated and Claire could see him doing the mental math. She knew that $75 wasn't easy to spare for a man running a farm on his own. 80, Luke said finally, his voice steady. Vance's smirk widened. $100. The crowd gasped. The auctioneer looked delighted. $100 for Mrs. Peterson's chocolate cream pie. Do I hear more? Luke's hands clenched at his sides. Claire could see the struggle on his face, pride warring with practicality, before she knew what she was doing. Claire stepped forward. 125, she called out. Luke looked at her in surprise. Vance's smirk faltered. 125 from the young lady, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear more? Vance stared at Claire, clearly reassessing her. After a moment, he shrugged. All yours, he said, turning away. Sold for $125, the auctioneer declared, banging his gavel. Claire handed over the money, nearly all she had left from her escape. Fondant accepted the pie. You didn't have to do that, Luke said quietly as they walked away from the auction. I wanted to, Claire replied. Besides, I like chocolate cream pie. Luke studied her face, then smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thank you. They walked back toward the truck. The pie balanced carefully in Claire's hands. It's still early, Luke said. We don't have to leave yet if you're enjoying yourself. Claire looked around at the festival. It was nice, and part of her wanted to stay, but the encounter with Vance had left her feeling exposed, and the curious glances from townspeople were starting to wear on her nerves. Would you mind if we went back? She asked. I've had enough people for one day. Luke nodded, understanding. In his eyes, sure, let's go home. Home. The word caught Claire off guard. Was that what the farm was becoming to her? She wasn't sure, but something about it felt right. Back at the farm, they shared the pie on the porch as the sun began to set. It was indeed delicious, rich and creamy with a perfect flaky crust. Worth every penny, Claire declared after her first bite. Luke nodded in agreement. My mother would have loved it. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the colors change in the sky. Martha lay at Luke's feet, occasionally looking up hopefully for a handout. No pie for you, Luke told the dog firmly. Chocolate's bad for dogs. Claire smiled at the exchange. There was something so genuine about Luke's relationship with his old dog, a loyalty and understanding that spoke of years together. "How long have you had her?" Claire asked. 10 years, Luke replied. "Got her as a pup when she was too high-strung for the shepherd who owned her. She calmed down eventually. Just needed the right place." Claire nodded, understanding the parallel he was drawing. "Can I ask you something?" Luke said after a moment. Claire tensed, but nodded. "That money for the pie, was that everything you had?" Claire looked down at her plate. "Not everything, but most of it." Luke was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "Because it mattered to you," Claire said simply. "And because Vance is the kind of man who thinks money can buy anything. I don't like men like that." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Luke didn't press further, but his expression softened. "I'll pay you back," he said. "No." Claire shook her head. "Consider it rent for the room." "The work you do more than covers that," Luke argued. "Then consider it a thank you," Claire insisted, "for not asking questions." Luke studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." They finished the pie as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Claire felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years, a peaceful moment untainted by fear or worry. "I should get to bed," she said finally. "Early start tomorrow." Luke nodded. "Sleep well, Claire." As she walked toward the barn, Claire felt his eyes on her back. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. Really seen. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, the weeks that followed settled into a comfortable routine. Claire and Luke worked side by side on the farm, their movements becoming more synchronized as they learned each other's rhythms. The summer heat intensified, making the work harder but also more satisfying when it was done. Claire found herself opening up more, sharing small pieces of her past, her childhood on the farm in Oklahoma, her favorite books, foods she loved to cook. Luke listened without pushing for more, offering his own stories in return. She learned that he'd gone to college for agricultural science, but came back when his father's drinking got worse. That he'd almost married once, years ago, but she'd chosen city life over farm life. That he played guitar, though he claimed not very well. "Play something for me," Claire urged one evening as they sat on the porch. Luke shook his head. "Trust me, you don't want that." "I do," Claire insisted. "Please." Something in her voice must have convinced him, because Luke went inside and returned with an old acoustic guitar. He sat in his rocking chair, adjusting the tuning. "Don't say I didn't warn you," he muttered, and then began to play. Despite his disclaimers, he wasn't bad at all. His fingers moved confidently over the strings, playing a slow, melancholy tune. He didn't sing, but the music spoke for itself, a lonesome sound that reminded Claire of open spaces and quiet evenings. When he finished, Claire applauded softly. "That was beautiful." Luke looked embarrassed. "It's just something I made up." "You wrote that?" Claire asked, impressed. Luke shrugged. "Just noodle around sometimes, helps me think." "Play another," Claire requested. Luke seemed about to refuse, then changed his mind. He started another song, this one a bit more upbeat. Claire watched his hands, the way his expression changed as he played, more open, less guarded, she realized. With a start that she was seeing a side of Luke that he didn't show often. The thought made her feel special, privileged somehow. When he finished the second song, Luke set the guitar aside. "That's enough embarrassment for one night." "It wasn't embarrassing," Claire assured him. "It was lovely." Luke looked at her, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that went beyond words. Claire felt her heart beat faster, and she looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "I should check on the tomatoes," she said, standing up. "I think some might be ready to pick." Luke let her go without comment, but she could feel his eyes on her as she walked to the garden. Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. These feelings developing for Luke, they were dangerous. Getting attached meant getting hurt. She knew that better than most, but as she knelt in the garden, checking the tomatoes that didn't really need checking, Claire had to admit to herself that it might already be too late. Luke Harrington, with his quiet strength and gentle ways, had begun to work his way into her heart, and that terrified her more than anything. The next morning, Claire was in the barn feeding the goats when she heard a car coming up the driveway. She tensed, moving to the barn door to peek out. It wasn't Luke's truck. He'd gone to town for supplies. This was a sleek black car that screamed money and power. Richard Vance stepped out, dressed in a business suit despite the heat. He looked around, spotted the house, and headed toward it. Claire hesitated, torn between hiding in the barn and confronting him. Before she could decide, Vance noticed the open barn door and changed direction, heading toward her. "Hello there," he called, his smile all perfect white teeth. "Claire, right, we met at the festival." Claire stepped out of the barn, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Mr. Vance, Luke isn't here." "Call me Richard," he said smoothly. "And actually, I was hoping to catch him out. Thought maybe you and I could have a little chat." Warning bells went off in Claire's head. "About what?" Vance glanced around the farm, taking in the fields, the barn, the modest house. "About opportunity for both you and Luke." Claire crossed her arms. "I'm not sure what you mean." Vance's smile never faltered. Let me be direct. Luke Harrington is sitting on prime real estate that he's wasting on corn and chickens. My company wants to develop this land into something worthwhile, a resort that would bring jobs and money to Red Hollow. Seems to me farming is worthwhile, Claire countered. Vance waved a dismissive hand. Farming is dying. Luke's barely making ends meet, and he knows it. I'm offering him enough money to retire comfortably. Then you should talk to him about it. I've tried, he's stubborn. Vance took a step closer. But you're new here. You haven't got the same emotional attachment to this place. You could help him see reason. Claire stiffened. And why would I do that? Because there would be something in it for you, of course. Vance's voice dropped to a confidential tone. I could make it worth your while. 10% of the deal. That's a lot of money, Claire. Enough to start over somewhere nice. Somewhere far from here. The implication was Claire Vance had figured out she was running from something. The realization sent a chill down Claire's spine. I'm not interested, she said firmly. And neither is Luke. Vance's smile cooled. Everyone has a price. Even Luke Harrington. It's just a matter of finding the right leverage. You should leave, Claire said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Vance studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Think about it. My offer won't last forever. He pulled out a business card and held it out to her. Call me when you change your mind. Claire didn't take the card. Vance smirked and tucked it into the pocket of her shirt, his fingers lingering a moment too long. Claire stepped back quickly. Have a nice day, Claire, Vance said, turning to walk back to his car. Tell Luke I stopped by, won't you? Claire watched him drive away, her heart pounding. Only when the dust from his car had settled did she pull the business card from her pocket and tear it into tiny pieces, scattering them in the wind. She had just finished feeding the goats when Luke's truck pulled up. One look at her face told him something was wrong. What happened? He asked, setting down a bag of groceries. Richard Vance was here, Claire said, watching Luke's expression darken. He wanted to talk about buying the farm. Luke's jaw tightened. What did he say to you? Claire hesitated, then decided on honesty. He offered me money to convince you to sell. Said there would be something in it for me. Luke's eyes flashed with anger. That son of a, he cut himself off, taking a deep breath. I'm sorry he bothered you. It's okay, Claire assured him. I told him we weren't interested. Luke looked at her sharply. Claire felt her cheeks warm. I just meant, ... This is your decision. Of course. I just didn't want him to think I'd help pressure you. Luke's expression softened. Thank you. He looked out across the fields, his gaze distant. Vance doesn't understand this land. It's not just property, it's history, it's family. I understand, Claire said quietly. Luke looked back at her, really looked at her. I know you do. He picked up the groceries. Come on, let's get lunch started. As they walked toward the house, Luke added, if Vance comes around again when I'm not here, don't engage with him. He's not as polished as he looks. Claire nodded, remembering the chill she'd felt when Vance touched her. I won't. I don't like him talking to you, Luke admitted, his voice low. Especially about this. I can handle myself, Claire assured him. Luke glanced at her. I don't doubt that, but Vance ... He doesn't always play fair. There was something in his tone that made Claire wonder if there was history there beyond the land dispute, but she didn't ask. Just as Luke respected her privacy, she respected his. They made lunch together in companionable silence, but Claire could feel a new tension in the air. Vance's visit had disturbed the peaceful rhythm they'd established. It was a reminder that the outside world existed, with all its complications and dangers. As they ate, Claire caught Luke watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked. Luke seemed to debate with himself before speaking. You said we weren't interested in Vance's offer. Claire nodded cautiously. I did. Does that mean you're planning to stay? For a while, at least. The question caught Claire off guard. She hadn't thought that far ahead. When she'd first arrived in Red Hollow, she'd been taking life one day at a time, too focused on escaping her past to consider her future. But now, ... I'd like to, she said softly, if that's okay with you. Luke's expression lightened, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. More than okay. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond just surviving. A future here, on this farm, with this quiet, steady man who asked for nothing but gave so much. It was terrifying and wonderful. But as Claire looked at Luke's smile, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen when her past inevitably caught up with her. Because it always did. And when that happened, would Luke still look at her the same way? That night, a fierce storm rolled in. Claire was reading in her room above the barn when the first lightning flashed, followed by a boom of thunder that shook the windows. Rain began to pound on the roof, heavy and insistent. Claire set her book aside, her heart racing. Storms had always made her nervous, but since the night he'd know she wouldn't think about that now. Another crack of lightning, closer this time. Claire flinched, pulling her knees up to her chest. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness engulfed her, broken only by the intermittent flashes of lightning. Claire's breathing grew shallow, panic rising in her throat. She tried to remind herself that she was safe, that it was just a storm, but her body wouldn't listen. A particularly loud thunder crash sent her scrambling off the bed. She needed to get out, needed air. Claire fumbled her way to the door and down the stairs, nearly slipping on the wet steps outside. The rain immediately soaked through her clothes, but she barely noticed. She stood in the yard, gasping for breath, trying to fight back the memories that the storm had triggered. That's how Luke found her standing in the pouring rain, arms wrapped around herself, trembling. He'd come to check on her when the power went out, carrying a flashlight and extra blankets. Claire, he called over the howling wind. What are you doing out here? She couldn't answer, couldn't find the words. Another lightning flash illuminated her face, and Luke saw the terror there. Without hesitation, he crossed the yard to her side. Come on, he said gently, placing a hand on her arm. Let's get you inside. Claire allowed him to guide her toward the main house, his steady presence anchoring her in the present. Inside, Luke wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and led her to the couch. He lit several candles, casting a warm glow around the room. I'll make some tea, he said, moving to the kitchen. Claire sat huddled under the blanket, gradually becoming aware of how wet and cold she was. Luke returned with 2 steaming mugs, setting hers on the coffee table in front of her. You're soaked through, he observed. Wait here. He disappeared down the hallway and returned with clothes, a flannel shirt and sweatpants that would be too big for her but dry. Bathrooms down the hall, he said, handing them to her. Change before you catch cold. Claire nodded and made her way to the bathroom. She changed quickly, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs of Luke's clothes. They smelled like him, like hay and soap and something uniquely Luke. When she returned to the living room, Luke had built a small fire in the fireplace. He sat on the couch watching the flames dance. Better, he asked as she sat beside him, keeping a careful distance between them. Claire nodded, picking up her tea. Thank you, I'm sorry about ... She gestured vaguely toward the door. No need to be sorry, Luke said. Storms can be frightening, but they both knew it wasn't just the storm that had sent Claire into a panic. Luke waited, patient as always, giving her the space to speak or remain silent. Outside, the thunder rumbled, but it sounded more distant now. The worst of the storm was passing. He liked storms, Claire said suddenly, her voice barely audible above the rain. That said they were the perfect cover. No one could hear. She trailed off, staring into her tea. Luke was very still, his expression carefully neutral. Your husband? He asked quietly. Claire looked up, surprised. How did you know? The way you tense when men get too close. The nightmares I've heard through the barn walls. The fact that you arrived with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on your back. Luke's eyes were sad. I've seen it before. Claire's hands tightened around her mug. He wasn't always like that. When we first met, he was charming, attentive, made me feel special. Luke listened, not interrupting. It started small. Criticism, checking my phone, getting angry if I was late. Then it got worse. Claire took a shaky breath. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward. Promised it would never happen again. I believed him. It's not your fault, Luke said quietly. Claire gave a bitter laugh. That's what the counselor at the women's shelter said too. The one I went to the first time I tried to leave. But I went back to him. So the second time, and the third time, and all the times after that ... Those were on me. No, Luke said firmly. Those were on him. Every single time. Claire looked at him, searching his face for judgment and finding none. Last night, she continued, her voice steadier now. There was a storm, like this one. He'd been drinking, he said. He said no one would hear me scream. Claire's voice caught. I thought he was going to kill me. I really did. Luke's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. What happened? He passed out and I ran, grabbed what I could carry and just ... left. I took buses, changed direction a few times in case he was looking for me, ended up here. Claire looked around the room at the flickering candles and the warm fire. I didn't plan it, but maybe it was meant to be. Maybe it was Luke, agreed softly. They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds, the crackling of the fire and the rain against the windows. The storm was gentler now, the thunder more distant. Are you afraid he'll find you? Luke asked finally. Claire nodded. He said he would. He said there was nowhere I could go that he wouldn't find me eventually. She looked at Luke, fear in her eyes. I should leave. I'm putting you at risk just by being here. No, Luke said, his voice firm. You're not going anywhere, not unless you want to. But if he comes, then we'll deal with it, Luke interrupted. Together the word hung between them. Together, such a simple word, but so full of meaning. Why? Claire asked, her voice breaking. Why would you risk that for me? You barely know me. Luke looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I know enough. I know you're strong, brave, kind. His voice softened. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face. I know that you talk to the plants when you think no one's listening. I know that you're the first person who's made this house feel like a home in a very long time. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Luke ... You don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that you're safe here, that you can stay as long as you want, that if he ever shows up, he'll have to go through me to get to you. Tears filled Claire's eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Luke repeated. Just, ... Don't run, not tonight, not in the rain. Claire managed a small smile through her tears. Okay, not tonight. Luke smiled back, relief evident in his expression. Good, now drink your tea before it gets cold. They sat together as the storm gradually subsided, the silence between them comfortable and companionable. For the first time since she'd fled her old life, Claire felt truly safe, not just physically safe, but emotionally safe, like she could breathe fully again. And as she watched Luke stoking the fire, his profile strong in the flickering light, Claire realized that she was falling for him, falling hard and fast, in a way that she'd promised herself she never would again. But maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Because Luke was different, steady and patient and kind in a way her ex-husband had never been. Even at the beginning. As the candles burned low and the fire settled into embers, Claire made a decision. She would stay. She would allow herself this chance at happiness, this possibility of healing. And if her past came looking for her, she wouldn't face it alone. Not anymore. Claire woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she was disoriented, her heart racing with the familiar panic of waking in a strange place. Then she remembered the storm, her breakdown, Luke's kindness. She was on the couch in his living room, covered with a quilt she hadn't seen before. House was quiet. Claire sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. Luke's clothes hung loosely on her frame, the sleeves rolled up several times. She could smell coffee brewing in the kitchen. Luke appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs in hand. Morning, he said, his voice gentle. Hope you slept okay. Claire accepted the coffee he offered, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I did, thank you. Luke sat in the armchair across from her, giving her space. His hair was damp, like he'd just showered, and he smelled like soap in the outdoors. Power's back on, he said. Storm passed around midnight. Claire nodded, sipping her coffee. After her emotional confession the night before, she felt oddly light, as if a weight had been lifted. But she also felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. About last night, she began.
Hold up.
Have to talk about it, if you don't want to, Luke interrupted. What you shared is your business. I won't bring it up again unless you do. Claire studied his face, the earnest eyes, the set of his jaw. She believed him. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for that, for everything. Luke nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. How do you feel about pancakes? I make a mean stack on Sunday mornings. The simple offer of normalcy was exactly what Claire needed. Pancakes sound perfect. After breakfast, Claire went back to her room above the barn to change into her own clothes. The day was clear and bright, as if the storm had washed everything clean. She could see Luke in the fields, already at work assessing any damage from the heavy rain. Claire joined him, falling into step beside him as they walked the property. Some of the corn had been flattened by the wind, and a section of fence was down where a branch had fallen on it. Not too bad, Luke assessed. Could have been worse. They worked side by side repairing the fence, their movements in sync. Claire was aware of a shift between them, a new understanding, a deeper connection. Luke didn't treat her differently after her confession, didn't handle her like she was fragile or broken. He just worked alongside her, the same as always, but with a quiet protectiveness that made her feel safe rather than smothered as the days passed. Claire found herself watching Luke more closely, the way his hands moved as he worked, the crinkle around his eyes when he smiled, the quiet strength in his shoulders. She caught him watching her too, when he thought she wasn't looking. Neither of them spoke about that night by the fire, but it hung between them not as a barrier, but as a bridge. One evening, about a week after the storm, Claire was in the kitchen making dinner when Luke came in from the fields. He was covered in dirt and looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. Something smells good, he said, washing his hands at the sink. Beef stew, Claire replied. My mother's recipe. Luke dried his hands on a towel. Need any help? Almost done, just waiting for the biscuits. Luke leaned against the counter, watching her move around his kitchen with an ease that would have been unimaginable a few weeks ago. Claire was aware of his gaze but didn't feel uncomfortable under it. Instead, she felt ... appreciated. Seen what? She asked, catching his thoughtful expression. Luke shook his head slightly. Nothing. Just thinking how different this place feels with you here. Claire felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the hot oven. Different how? Fuller, Luke said simply. Better. The timer dinged, saving Claire from having to respond. She pulled the biscuits from the oven, their golden tops making her mouth water. They ate at the kitchen table, talking about the day's work and plans for tomorrow. It felt so normal, so domestic, that Claire had to remind herself this wasn't really her life, that she was still in many ways a guest here. After dinner, they sat on the porch as usual, watching the sunset. Martha lay at Luke's feet, occasionally thumping her tail when one of them spoke. I've been thinking, Luke said after a comfortable silence. The farmer's market is this Saturday in town. I usually take some of the vegetables to sell. Would you like to come? Claire hesitated. The festival had been one thing, a brief appearance in a crowd. The farmer's market would mean spending hours in town, interacting with people, being visible. I don't know, she said honestly. I'm not sure I'm ready for that much exposure. Luke nodded, understanding in his eyes. No pressure, just thought I'd offer. Claire looked out at the fields, golden in the setting sun. The farm had become her sanctuary, her hiding place, but she couldn't hide forever. Eventually, she would have to learn to live in the world again, a world that included other people besides Luke. Actually, she said, making up her mind, I think I'd like to go. Luke's smile was worth the nervousness the decision sparked in her chest. Great, we'll leave early, the best spots go fast. They talked a bit longer as the stars began to appear, then said goodnight. As Claire walked back to the barn, she felt a flutter of excitement mixed with her anxiety. A day in town with Luke, it felt almost like a date. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Saturday dawned clear and warm. Claire dressed carefully in her cleanest jeans and a blue t-shirt that brought out her eyes. She'd been growing her hair out since arriving, in Red Hollow, and now it fell in soft waves past her shoulders. Looking in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. Her face had filled out from regular meals, and her eyes had lost that haunted look. Luke was loading crates of vegetables into the truck when she came down from her room. He looked up, and something in his expression made Claire's heart skip. You look nice, he said simply. Thanks, Claire replied, suddenly shy. So do you. And he didn't clean jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his hair still damp from a shower. They drove into town just as the sun was clearing the horizon. The town square had been transformed into a bustling market, with booths being set up and farmers unloading their wares. Luke secured a good spot near the center of the square and showed Claire how to arrange the vegetables for maximum appeal. Tomatoes in front, leafy greens displayed so they looked fresh and crisp, zucchini and cucumbers arranged in neat rows. You've got an eye for this, Luke commented as Claire rearranged some bell peppers to better catch the light. My mother used to say presentation is half the sale, Claire replied, surprised at how easily the memory came without the usual ache that accompanied thoughts of her past life. People began to arrive as the morning progressed. Luke seemed to know everyone, greeting them by name and introducing Claire as my friend who's helping out at the farm. Claire smiled and nodded, letting Luke handle most of the interactions. Business was steady. Luke's produce had a reputation for quality, and their booth was constantly busy. Claire gradually grew more comfortable, making change and answering simple questions about the vegetables. Around mid-morning, Ellie from the diner stopped by, her face lighting up when she saw Claire. Well, look who's out and about, she exclaimed. Good to see you again, honey. How are you settling in at Luke's place? Very well, thank you, Claire replied, surprised at how easy it was to talk to the cheerful woman. She's a natural with the plants, Luke added, a note of pride in his voice that made Claire blush. Ellie looked between them, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Is that right? Well, isn't that nice? She selected some tomatoes and zucchini, paying Luke before turning back to Claire. You should stop by the diner sometime. Best pie in the county, if I do say so myself. We will, Luke promised, his use of "we" not lost on Claire. As Ellie walked away, Claire caught Luke watching her with a soft expression. What, she asked. Nothing, he said, turning back to rearrange some cucumbers. Just glad you came today. The market was at its busiest when Richard Vance appeared, weaving through the crowds with a confidence that set Claire's teeth on edge. He was dressed casually but expensively, designer sunglasses perched on his head. Harrington, he called as he approached their booth, playing farmer for the townfolk. I see. Luke's expression cooled Vance. Vance's gaze shifted to Claire, his smile widening. And a lovely Claire. You're looking well. Country air agrees with you. Claire said nothing, busying herself with rearranging vegetables that didn't need rearranging. Did you need something, Vance? Luke asked, his tone making it clear that the interruption wasn't welcome. Just being neighborly, Vance replied, his smile never faltering. Thought I'd check if you'd had a chance to reconsider my offer. Answer's still no, Luke said firmly. Vance sighed dramatically. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Harrington. My investors are getting impatient. They want that land, and they're prepared to do whatever it takes to get it. Something in his tone made Claire look up. There was an edge to Vance's friendly demeanor now, a hint of menace beneath the smile. Is that a threat? Luke asked quietly. Vance spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. Just stating facts. Business is business after all. His gaze shifted to Claire again. I'm surprised you haven't convinced him yet. My offer to you still stands. Claire felt Luke stiffen beside her. What offer? He asked. It's nothing, Claire said quickly. Mr. Vance was just leaving. Vance smirked. Think about it, both of you. Everyone has a price. He nodded to them both and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Luke turned to Claire, his expression troubled. What offer was he talking about? Claire sighed. When he came to the farm that day, he offered me money to convince you to sell, said there would be something in it for me if I helped persuade you. Luke's jaw tightened. And you didn't tell me this part. I didn't want to upset you, Claire explained. I told him no. It didn't seem important. It is important, Luke insisted, his voice low but intense. Vance doesn't make offers like that unless he's desperate. He must really want the land. But why? Claire asked. There are other farms around here, aren't there? Luke nodded slowly. There are, but mine sits on the highest point in the valley. Best views for miles. He looked troubled. I need to find out what he's planning. The market seemed to lose its charm after Vance's visit. Claire could see that Luke was preoccupied, his usual easy manner replaced by a tense watchfulness. When they packed up their unsold produce in the early afternoon, Claire was relieved to be heading back to the farm. The drive back was quiet, Luke lost in thought. Claire wanted to reach out, to ease the worry lines on his forehead, but she held back, uncertain of her place in this new complication. As they turned onto the road leading to the farm, Luke finally spoke. I'm sorry about Vance. He has a way of ruining a good day. It's okay, Claire assured him. We still had a nice morning. Luke glanced at her, a small smile breaking through his concern. We did, didn't we? They unloaded the truck in companionable silence, storing the unsold vegetables in the cool cellar beneath the farmhouse. When they were done, Luke stretched his back, cracking after the long day. How about a walk, he suggested. I could use some fresh air after being in town all day. Claire nodded, feeling the same need to clear her head. They set off across the fields, Martha trotting alongside them. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and a gentle breeze rustled the corn. They walked without speaking for a while, the tension from Vance's visit gradually easing from Luke's shoulders. Eventually they reached a small rise overlooking the farm, the highest point on the property. Claire realized that Luke stopped, gazing out at the view. From here they could see the entire valley, the patchwork of farms, the town of Red Hollow. In the distance, and beyond that, rolling hills that turned blue at the horizon. My grandfather used to bring me up here when I was a boy, Luke said softly. Said a man needs to see what he's working for. Claire looked at him, understanding dawning. This is why Vance wants your land. The view, Luke nodded. Perfect spot. For the main building of a resort, guests could see for miles. It's beautiful, Claire agreed, but I think it's more beautiful as farmland. Luke looked at her, something warm in his eyes. So do I. They stood there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Claire was acutely aware of Luke beside her, solid and steady as the land itself. Thank you for today, she said softly, for bringing me to the market. Thank you for coming, Luke replied. It was ... nice having you there. There was a question in his eyes, a hesitation that matched the flutter in Claire's chest. She felt herself leaning toward him slightly, drawn by something stronger than fear. Luke's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, lingering on her cheek. Claire, he said, her name almost a whisper on his lips. The moment stretched between them, fragile and perfect. Then Martha barked suddenly, breaking the spell. Luke dropped his hand, taking a step back. We should head back, he said, his voice rough. It's getting dark. Claire nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They walked back to the farm in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. At the fork in the path where they would separate Luke to the house, Claire to the barn, they paused. Good night, Claire, Luke said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Good night, Luke, she replied softly. As Claire climbed the stairs to her room, her heart was racing. She was falling for Luke. Harrington had fallen for him already, if she was honest with herself. And maybe, just maybe, he was falling for her too. The thought was both wonderful and terrifying. The next morning, Claire was in the garden harvesting beans when she heard a vehicle coming up the driveway. Her first thought was Vance again, and she tensed, prepared for another confrontation. But it wasn't Vance's sleek car that appeared around the bend. It was a sheriff's cruiser, moving slowly, almost cautiously. Claire's blood ran cold. She dropped the basket of beans and froze, her mind racing. Had he found her? Had her ex-husband somehow tracked her down and sent the police to bring her back? The cruiser parked, and a man in a sheriff's uniform stepped out. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face. He looked around, spotted Claire, and headed toward her. Morning, ma'am, he said, tipping his hat. I'm Sheriff Reynolds. You must be Claire. Claire nodded, not trusting her voice. How did he know her name? Is Luke around? The sheriff asked, glancing toward the farmhouse. He's in the barn, Claire managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Is something wrong? Sheriff Reynolds gave her a reassuring smile. Just need to talk to him about something. Don't worry yourself. Luke emerged from the barn just then, wiping his hands on a rag. He spotted the sheriff and came over, his expression concerned. Dave, he greeted the sheriff. What brings you out here? The familiarity in Luke's tone eased some of Claire's panic. Clearly, Luke knew this man. Got some news you should hear, Sheriff Reynolds said, his voice lowering. Could we talk privately? Luke glanced at Claire, hesitation in his eyes. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Claire. The sheriff raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. All right then. There was a break-in at the county records office last night. Nothing stolen, but someone was going through the property records. Your file specifically. Luke frowned. My file. Why would anyone, Vance? Claire said, the realization hitting her. He's looking for something to use against you. Sheriff Reynolds looked at Claire with new interest. You've met Richard Vance. He came here, Claire explained. Tried to pressure Luke to sell the farm. Said his investors were getting impatient. The sheriff nodded slowly. That fits. Word around town is that Vance has some big investors from the city backing his resort project. They've bought up 3 farms already, but they need yours, Luke. Yours is the key piece. Well, they can't have it, Luke said firmly. I know that, Sheriff Reynolds said. But Vance is getting desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. You think he broke into the records office? Luke asked. Can't prove it, the sheriff admitted. But it's a hell of a coincidence. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Keep an eye out for anything unusual. Luke nodded, his expression grave. Thanks, Dave, I appreciate the warning. The sheriff tipped his hat again. No problem. You to be careful. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Luke, maybe think about getting those security cameras we talked about. Better safe than sorry. After the sheriff drove away, Luke and Claire stood in silence for a moment, processing the news. I'm sorry, Claire said finally. This is escalating because of me. Because I was here when Vance came, and he saw an opportunity. Luke shook his head firmly. This has nothing to do with you. Vance has been after this land for years. He's just getting more aggressive. But Claire wasn't convinced. The timing seemed too coincidental. Vance's increased pressure coming so soon after her arrival. What if he had somehow discovered her past? What if he was planning to use that against Luke? Maybe I should leave, she suggested, the words catching in her throat. Just for a while, until this blows over. No, Luke said, his voice leaving. No room for argument. That's exactly what Vance wants, to isolate me, make me vulnerable. We're stronger together, Claire. Together. The word hung between them, full of meaning. Okay, Claire agreed softly. Together. Luke's expression softened. Good. Now, let's get back to work. Those beans won't harvest themselves. They returned to their tasks, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling of unease that the sheriff's visit had left. Someone was digging into records, looking for information, looking for leverage. It was only a matter of time before they found something they could use. And Claire had more to hide than most. The next few days passed without incident, but Claire could feel a tension in the air, like the pressure before a storm. Luke installed security cameras at the driveway and around the barn, checking them each morning and evening. Claire threw herself into work, trying to keep her mind off the threats both from Vance and from her own past. She started a new project, clearing an overgrown patch near the house to create a flower garden. What are you planning to plant? Luke asked, watching her turn the soil one evening. Wildflowers, Claire replied. Lavender, maybe some roses, if they'll grow here. Luke smiled. They'll grow. This soil's good for just about anything, with enough care. There was something in his tone that made Claire look up. He was watching her with that soft expression again, the one that made her heart race. Luke, she began, not sure what she wanted to say but feeling the need to say something. Before she could continue, the sound of a car engine interrupted them. They both turned toward the driveway, tension immediately replacing the gentle moment. But it wasn't Vance's car that appeared. It was a small blue sedan, unfamiliar to both of them. A woman stepped out, middle-aged, with a professional air about her. She was dressed in a neat suit and carried a briefcase. She spotted them and headed in their direction, her heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. Mr. Harrington, she called. Luke Harrington. Luke stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Claire. That's me. Can I help you? The woman held out a business card. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm an attorney representing Midland Development Corporation. Luke didn't take the card. Vance's company. Miss Wilson's smile was practiced and cool. Mr. Vance is one of our executives. Yes. I'm here to present you with a formal offer for your property. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. This is a very generous offer, Mr. Harrington. Well above market value. My clients are prepared to close quickly and allow you to remain on the property for up to 6 months while you relocate. Luke didn't take the folder either, not interested. Ms. Wilson's smile didn't falter. I understand your attachment to the property, Mr. Harrington, family legacy and all that. But I urge you to at least look at the numbers before making a decision. The answer is no, Luke repeated firmly. It doesn't matter what numbers are in that folder. Now the lawyer's smile did slip, just a fraction. Mr. Harrington, my clients are very motivated buyers. They've instructed me to inform you that if this offer is refused, they are prepared to explore other options. Is that a threat? Luke asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Not at all, Miss Wilson assured him smoothly. Simply a statement of fact. This property is quite valuable to my client's development plans. They will pursue all legal avenues to acquire it. Legal being the key word, Claire said, stepping forward. Anything else would be a problem. Miss Wilson looked at Claire as if noticing her for the first time. And you are? Claire Moreno, she replied, using her full name without hesitation. "I live here." Something flickered in the lawyer's eyes, recognition perhaps. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "I see," Ms. Wilson said, her tone neutral. "Well, Ms. Moreno, Mr. Harrington, I'll leave the offer for you to review." She set the folder on a nearby fence post. "You have 48 hours to respond before the offer is withdrawn." She handed Luke her card, which he took reluctantly. "Call me when you're ready to discuss terms. Good day." They watched in silence as she drove away, the blue sedan disappearing down the driveway. Luke picked up the folder from the fence post. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Inside the farmhouse, Luke spread the documents on the kitchen table. Claire looked over his shoulder, her eyes widening at the offer amount. "That's a lot of money," she said softly. Luke nodded, his expression troubled. "More than the farm is worth, objectively speaking." He looked up at Claire. "It's enough to start over somewhere else. Buy a new farm." Even Claire studied his face. "Is that what you want? To start over somewhere else?" Luke was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "This land, it's more than just property to me. It's where I grew up, where my mother taught me to plant seeds and my grandfather showed me how to build fences. It's where I learned everything I know about being a man." He looked around the kitchen, his gaze lingering on the worn wooden table. "The view from the window, I always thought I'd raise my own family here someday." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Then don't sell," Claire said firmly. "No amount of money is worth giving up something that means that much to you." Luke looked at her, something like hope in his eyes. "You think I should fight?" "I think this is your home," Claire replied, "and no one has the right to take it from you." Luke's hand found hers on the table, his fingers warm and calloused. "Our home," he corrected softly. "If you want it to be." Claire's heart stuttered in her chest. "Luke, I know it's fast," he said quickly. "I know you've been hurt, and you're still healing. But Claire, these past weeks with you, they've been the happiest I can remember in a long time." Claire couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the emotions flooding through her. Fear, hope, longing, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unravel. Luke misinterpreted her silence. "I'm sorry," he said, withdrawing his hand. "I shouldn't have." "No," Claire interrupted, catching his hand before he could pull away completely. "Don't be sorry, I feel it too. I'm just scared." Luke's expression softened. "Of what?" "Of everything," Claire admitted. "Of trusting again. Of being happy and then losing it all. Of my past catching up with me and ruining this beautiful thing we're building." "Your past is your past," Luke said firmly. "It doesn't define you. And it doesn't scare me." "It should," Claire whispered. "He's not going to just let me go, Luke. If he finds me, when he finds me, he'll try to take me back. And he won't care who gets hurt in the process." "Let him try," Luke said, his voice low and fierce. "I'm not afraid of a man who hurts women to feel strong." Claire looked at him really, looked at him and saw the conviction in his eyes. Luke Harrington wasn't a violent man, but he was a protective one. He would stand between her and danger without hesitation. "I can't ask you to risk that," she said. "You're not asking," Luke replied. "I'm offering." He squeezed her hand gently. "We can face Vance, and we can face your past too, together. Together." There was that word again, so simple and yet so powerful. Claire took a deep breath. Okay, Luke repeated, a smile beginning to form. "Okay, let's face it together," Claire clarified. "All of it. Vance, whatever comes next." Luke's smile widened, reaching his eyes and lighting up his whole face. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance to try." Before Claire could respond, a sharp bark from outside caught their attention. Martha, who rarely barked without reason. Luke was immediately alert. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the door. But Claire was already following him. "Together, remember." Luke hesitated, then nodded. "Stay behind me at least." They stepped onto the porch. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Martha was at the edge of the driveway, her hackles raised, barking at something. They couldn't see. Luke whistled, calling the dog back. Martha came reluctantly, still growling low in her throat. "What is it, girl?" Luke asked, scanning the property. Claire felt it before she saw it, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. She turned slowly, looking toward the fields. A figure stood at the edge of the cornfield, partially hidden in the shadows. As Claire stared, the figure stepped forward into the fading light. It was a Matal, well-dressed with dark hair and a face that had once been handsome before drink and anger had hardened it. A face Claire knew better than her own. Her heart stopped, then raced painfully in her chest. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Michael, her husband, had found her. Time seemed to stop as Claire stared at the man emerging from the shadows. Michael Moreno looked thinner than when she'd last seen him, his handsome face harder, his eyes cold and calculating as they locked onto her. "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice carrying across the yard that smooth, controlled voice she'd once found charming and now associated only with fear. "You're a hard woman to find." Luke stepped in front of Claire protectively. "You need to leave," he said, his voice firm and steady. "You're trespassing." Michael's gaze shifted to Luke, assessing him with cold precision. "And you are." Luke Harrington. This is my property. Michael's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, Luke Harrington, that's my wife you're harboring. Ex-wife, Claire said, finding her voice at last. She moved to stand beside Luke, refusing to hide behind him despite the fear coursing through her. The divorce papers were filed months ago. Michael's smile tightened. Papers you had no right to file. We took vows, Claire. Till death do us part, remember. The threat was subtle but clear. Claire felt Luke tense beside her. How did you find me? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Michael took a step closer, causing Martha to growl low in her throat. He stopped, eyeing the dog warily. It wasn't easy, he admitted, but I have ... resources, friends and useful places. His gaze hardened. Did you really think I'd just let you go? After everything I've done for you? Luke's hand found Claire's, squeezing gently. The simple contact gave her strength. You need to leave, she repeated Luke's words. I'm not going back with you. Not now, not ever. Michael's facade of calm began to crack. Don't be stupid, Claire. You have nothing here. No money, no friends, no family, just this. He gestured dismissively at Luke and the farm. Temporary situation. She has me, Luke said quietly. And this is her home for as long as she wants it to be. Michael's eyes narrowed, truly seeing Luke for the first time. I see, playing house with the farmer, are we, Claire? How quaint. His voice took on a dangerous edge. Does he know about your episodes, the medication you need? How unstable you can be? Stop it, Claire said, anger replacing fear. Those are your lies, not my reality. I have documentation, Michael continued as if she hadn't spoken. Medical records, police reports about your erratic behavior. No one would blame me for wanting to bring my troubled wife home where she belongs. Luke didn't waver. I think it's time for you to go, he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Michael took another step forward. I'm not leaving without my wife. She's not going anywhere with you, Luke countered. The standoff was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the yard as a vehicle turned into the driveway. For a moment, Claire feared it was Vance arriving to complicate an already volatile situation. But the car that pulled up was the sheriff's cruiser. Relief flooded through Claire as Sheriff Reynolds stepped out, his hand resting casually on his holster. Evening, folks, he said, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the situation. Everything all right here, Luke? This man was just leaving, Luke replied, not taking his eyes off Michael. The sheriff approached, his expression neutral but alert. Sir, I'm Sheriff Dave Reynolds. Mind telling me your business here? Michael straightened, adopting a more civil tone. Michael Moreno. I'm Claire's husband. I've been searching for her for months, worried sick. She's not well. Claire felt a familiar panic rising, the same helplessness she'd felt whenever Michael had charmed doctors, friends, even police officers into believing his version of events over hers, but the sheriff's next words surprised her. That right, he said skeptically. Because I got a call from a Detective Santos in Kansas City this morning. It seems there's a restraining order out against a Michael Moreno. Domestic violence charges pending. Michael's composure slipped. That's a misunderstanding, usually is. The sheriff interrupted dryly. Mr. Moreno, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this property. Ms. Moreno clearly doesn't want you here, and this is private land. Michael's expression hardened. This isn't over. Claire is my wife. She belongs with me. That's not for you to decide, the sheriff replied calmly. Now, you can leave voluntarily, or I can escort you to the county line. Your choice. For a tense moment, Claire thought Michael might refuse. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and she recognized the barely contained rage in his eyes, the look that had always preceded his worst outbursts. But with the sheriff present, Michael had no choice. Fine, he said tightly. I'll go. But this isn't over, Claire. We need to talk alone. No, we don't, Claire replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Whatever we had to say to each other was said months ago. The divorce will be finalized whether you cooperate or not. Michael's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. He turned to Luke. Enjoy her while you can, farmer. She'll be back where she belongs soon enough. That's enough, the sheriff interrupted. Time for you to go. Mr. Moreno, I'll follow you to make sure you find your way out of town. With one last venomous look at Claire, Michael turned and walked back toward the road, where Claire could now see a rental car parked. You folks okay? Sheriff Reynolds asked once Michael was out of earshot. Luke looked at Claire, concern evident in his eyes. Claire, she realized she was trembling, the adrenaline of the confrontation catching up with her. But beneath the fear was something else, a sense of triumph. She had faced Michael and stood her ground. She hadn't crumbled, hadn't given in. I'm okay, she said, and meant it. The sheriff nodded. I'll make sure he leaves town, and I'll have deputies keep an eye out for him, in case he decides to come back. He glanced at Luke. Might want to stay alert for a few days, just in case. We will, Luke assured him. Thanks, Dave. After the sheriff left, following Michael's car down the driveway, Claire and Luke stood in silence for a moment. The tension of the confrontation still hung in the air. Are you really okay? Luke asked softly. Claire took a deep breath. I think so. I can't believe he found me. Come on, Luke said gently. Let's go inside. In the kitchen, Luke made tea while Claire sat at the table, still processing what had happened. Martha lay at her feet, as if sensing her need for comfort. How did the sheriff know about the restraining order? Claire wondered aloud. Luke set a mug of tea in front of her. I called him this morning, he admitted. After you told me about your ex, gave him Michael's name, asked him to check if there were any records, just in case. Claire looked up at him, surprised you did that. Luke nodded, sitting across from her. Wanted to be prepared. Didn't expect him to show up so soon, though. Thank you, Claire said softly. For thinking ahead, for standing with me. Luke reached across the table and took her hand. Always the simple promise warmed her more than the tea. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thought. He'll be back, Claire said finally. Michael doesn't give up easily. We'll be ready, Luke assured her. And next time we'll have a better plan. Claire nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. The lawyer, Ms. Wilson, she recognized my name. I think she might have been working with Michael. Luke frowned. Vance and your ex working together. That's a troubling thought. It would make sense, Claire mused. Vance wants your land. What better leverage than helping my ex-husband find me? Luke's expression darkened. If that's true, Vance has crossed a line. Claire squeezed his hand. Let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But they both knew it probably wasn't. The timing was too perfect, Michael showing up just days after Vance's lawyer had heard Claire's full name. Either way, Luke said, we need to be ready for both of them. The next morning, Claire woke early after a restless night. She'd dreamed of Mike Love being trapped, of running and never escaping. She sat on the edge of her bed, reminding herself that she was safe, that Luke was nearby, that the sheriff was keeping an eye out. She dressed quickly and headed down to the farmhouse. Luke was already in the kitchen making breakfast. He looked up when she entered, concern evident in his eyes. How'd you sleep? He asked. Not great, Claire admitted. But I'm okay. Luke nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. Hungry? Starving, Claire replied, forcing a smile. They ate breakfast together, talking about ordinary things, the weather forecasts, which vegetables needed harvesting, whether the second cutting of hay would be good this year. The normalcy was comforting. A reminder that life went on despite the threats hanging over them. After breakfast, they went about their usual morning chores. Claire was in the garden when she heard a car coming up the driveway. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm as she stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. It wasn't Michael's rental car, nor was it Vance's sleek sedan. It was a modest, compact car she didn't recognize. A woman stepped out middle-aged, with short gray hair and a nonsense demeanor. She spotted Claire and headed toward her. Claire Marino, she called. Claire tensed. Yes, the woman held out a business card. I'm Diane Keller, attorney at law. I specialize in family law and domestic violence cases. Claire took the card cautiously. How did you find me? Sheriff Reynolds contacted me, Miss Keller explained. Said you might need some legal help. Luke emerged from the barn, alerted by the visitor. He approached cautiously, positioning himself near Claire. It's okay, Claire told him. She's a lawyer. The sheriff sent her. Luke relaxed slightly but remained attentive as Claire and Miss Keller talked. The sheriff mentioned your situation, the lawyer explained. I've handled many cases like yours. Ms. Moreno, I can help expedite your divorce and make sure the restraining order is enforced, even across state lines. I don't have much money, Claire admitted. Ms. Keller waved off her concern. We can work something out. The important thing is to ensure your legal protections are in place. They moved to the porch, where Claire explained her situation in more detail, how she'd filed for divorce before fleeing, the restraining order she'd obtained after the last violent incident, her fear that Michael would try to use the legal system against her. Classic abuser tactics, Ms. Keller nodded. But we can counter them. You have documentation of the abuse. Claire nodded. Hospital records, police reports, photos. Good, that will help. The lawyer made notes as they talked. And there's something else you should know. Your husband, ex-husband, Claire corrected automatically. Ms. Keller smiled. Your ex-husband is in financial trouble. His business is failing, and he's facing several lawsuits from former business partners. That might be why he's so desperate to find you. What do you mean? Luke asked. Joint accounts, Claire realized. When I left, I didn't touch our joint savings. I didn't want to give him any reason to come after me for theft. Miss Keller nodded. And if those accounts are substantial, they were, Claire confirmed. My parents left me money when they died. Michael insisted we put it in joint accounts, which means he can't access all of it without your signature for certain transactions, the lawyer concluded. It's not just about control for him, it's about money too. The revelation was both disturbing and empowering. Michael's pursuit wasn't just about possessing Claire, it was also about financial desperation. Somehow, that made him seem less powerful, more human. What should we do? Luke asked. First, we strengthen the legal barriers, Ms. Keller replied. I'll file papers to have the restraining order recognized here in this jurisdiction. Then we push through the divorce, with or without his cooperation. She looked at Claire directly. And we need to secure your financial assets. Separate what's rightfully yours from the joint holdings. Claire nodded, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time since she'd fled, she was doing more than just running and hiding. She was fighting back after Ms. Keller left. With plans to meet again the following day, Claire and Luke sat on the porch, processing this new development. I feel like I can breathe again, Claire admitted. Like there's a way forward that doesn't involve constantly looking over my shoulder. Luke smiled, genuine pleasure in his eyes. I'm glad you deserve to feel safe. Claire looked out at the farm, at the fields Luke tended so carefully, at the garden she'd helped bring back to life, at the flower beds she'd started near the house. In just a few months, this place had become more of a home than anywhere I've lived in years. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Luke's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. No thanks needed. Having you here, it's changed everything, Claire, for the better. The warmth in his eyes made her heart flutter. She leaned toward him slightly, and this time there was no interruption, no barking dog, no unexpected visitor. Luke's lips met hers in a gentle kiss. It was brief, almost hesitant, but it sent warmth spreading through Claire's entire body. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. I've wanted to do that for a while now, Luke admitted, his voice husky. Me too, Claire replied softly. The moment was perfect, quiet, unhurried, full of promise. It was everything her relationship with Michael had never been. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke the spell. Claire tensed automatically, but Luke squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's probably just the sheriff checking in, he said. But it wasn't the sheriff's cruiser that rounded the bend in the driveway. It was Richard Vance's black sedan, followed by another Cara police car, but not Sheriff Reynolds. This was a state police vehicle. Luke stood, his expression hardening. Stay here, he told Claire. I'll handle this. But Claire stood as well. Together, remember. They walked down the porch steps hand in hand as Vance and a state trooper approached. Harrington, Vance called, his usual smirk firmly in place. Hope we're not interrupting anything. What do you want, Vance? Luke asked coldly. Vance gestured to the trooper beside him. This is Officer Bates with the state police. He's here about a trespassing complaint. Luke frowned. Trespassing on my own property? Actually, Vance replied smoothly, there seems to be some question about property boundaries. Our surveyors have found some discrepancies in the county records. The trooper, a young man who looked uncomfortable with the situation, stepped forward. Mr. Harrington, we've received a formal complaint from Midland Development Corporation regarding a boundary dispute. Until it's resolved, there's a temporary order preventing any work on the disputed section. What disputed section? Luke demanded. This land has been in my family for generations. The boundaries are clear. Vance pulled out a folder similar to the one his lawyer had presented with the offer. These documents suggest otherwise. According to our surveyors, the northeast corner of your property, about 20 acres, actually belongs to the old Miller place, which my company now owns. Luke's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Show me these so-called documents. As Luke reviewed the papers, Claire could see the worry in his eyes. She didn't understand all the legal terminology, but she could tell this was serious. This is garbage, Luke said finally. These are doctored documents. The original survey from 1952 clearly shows that land belongs to the Harrington farm. Where is that original survey? Vance asked innocently. Because the records office only has these. He tapped the papers in Luke's hand, and suddenly Claire understood. The break-in at the county records office, someone had stolen or altered the original documents. This is why you broke into the records office, she said. The pieces falling into place. You replaced the real documents with fakes. Vance's smile faltered slightly. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Moreno. I'd be careful about making statements like that without proof. The trooper looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I'm just here to serve the notice. This is a civil matter that needs to be resolved in court. Until then, the disputed area is off limits to both parties. And where exactly is this disputed area? Luke asked. Vance's smile returned. The northeast corner, including that lovely hill with the view. Convenient timing, too, since we're ready to break ground on the resort's main building. Claire felt sick. Vance had found a way to take the most valuable part of Luke's land without having to buy the whole farm. And he'd done it by manipulating the legal system, just as Michael had tried to do to her. This won't stand, Luke said firmly. I have copies of the original surveys in the house. My grandfather kept records of everything. Vance's smile dimmed slightly. Well, we'll see what the judge says. In the meantime, Officer Bates here will be marking off the disputed area. I trust you'll respect the legal order to stay clear of it. Luke's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he nodded curtly. We'll follow the law, unlike some people. After Vance and the trooper left, Luke stormed into the house, heading straight for the old desk in the study. Claire followed, watching as he pulled out drawers and rifled through files. They have to be here, Luke muttered, frustration evident in his voice. My grandfather showed them to me years ago. What exactly are we looking for? Claire asked, wanting to help survey maps. property deeds, anything that proves that northeast section belongs to this farm. Luke ran a hand through his hair. My grandfather was meticulous about documentation. He had copies of everything. They searched for hours, going through decades of paperwork. Luke grew increasingly agitated as folder after folder yielded nothing related to the property boundaries. He showed me, Luke insisted, sitting back on his heels amid piles of papers. I remember him pointing to the map, showing me how the creek formed the natural boundary between our land and the Miller place. Claire sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. We'll find them, or we'll find another way to prove Vance is lying. Luke looked at her, gratitude in his eyes despite his frustration. I can't lose that land, Claire. Not just because of the view, but because it's part of this farm, part of my family's legacy. I know, Claire said softly, and we won't let Vance steal it. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Luke sighed, pushing himself to his feet. Probably the sheriff, coming to tell me about the boundary dispute. But when he opened the door, it wasn't Sheriff Reynolds standing there. It was Michael. Claire froze, her heart racing. How had he gotten past the sheriff's patrols? What are you doing here? Luke demanded, blocking the doorway. The sheriff made it clear you're not welcome. Michael held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I just want to talk. No trouble. Talk to her lawyer, Luke replied coldly. Claire has nothing to say to you. Actually, Michael said, his voice deceptively calm. I think she might be interested in what I have to say. It concerns your property dispute. Luke hesitated, glancing back at Claire, who had approached cautiously. What do you know about that? Michael smiled that charming, dangerous smile that Claire knew so well. Let's just say Mr. Vance and I have a mutual interest in certain outcomes. He was quite helpful in locating my wife. In return, I provided some information about the old property records. Claire felt her blood run cold. You're working with Vance, not working with. Exactly, Michael corrected. More like a mutually beneficial arrangement. He helps me find you. I help him acquire the land he wants. Luke demanded. How could you possibly help him with that? Michael's smile widened. By telling him where to look. You see, Claire's father was a surveyor. Did she ever mention that he worked all over the Midwest, including this county, back in the 80s, had access to all kinds of records? Claire stared at him in confusion. My father was a wheat farmer. He never surveyed anything except our own fields. That's not what his employment records show, Michael countered smoothly. Imagine my surprise when I discovered, during our divorce proceedings, that James Moreno had worked for Westland Surveying from 1982 to 1985. Right here in this county. Claire shook her head. That's impossible. We never lived here. I would remember. You were what? 5 years old. Children don't always remember everything. Michael stepped closer to the door. The point is, your father had access to these records, and now, so does Vance. Luke's expression was thunderous. So you helped Vance falsify documents to steal my land, all to get back at Claire. Not just to get back at Claire, Michael corrected. Though that is a pleasant bonus. Vance is paying me quite well for my assistance. Enough to start over after. Claire drained our accounts. I didn't touch our accounts, Claire protested. Michael waved dismissively. Details. The point is, I'm here to offer a deal. He looked directly at Claire. Come home with me, and I'll tell Vance to back off. I'll even provide evidence that the documents were falsified. Claire felt sick. You're blackmailing me. I'd prefer to think of it as offering a solution that benefits everyone. Michael replied. You come home where you belong. Harrington keeps his precious farm intact, and I get my wife back. Everyone wins. Except Claire, Luke said quietly. She doesn't win. She goes back to being abused and controlled. Michael's expression hardened. That's between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Claire corrected, finding her voice. And there's no deal to be made here. Michael, I'm never coming back to you. Not for any reason, not for any price. You'd let him lose his farm? Michael asked, gesturing to Luke. Because that's what will happen. Vance has the resources to drag this out in court for years. Harrington will go bankrupt trying to fight it. Claire looked at Luke, saw the worry in his eyes despite his attempt to hide it. She knew Michael was right about one thing: a prolonged legal battle could ruin Luke financially, even if he eventually won. There has to be another way, she said. There isn't, Michael insisted. This is the only deal on the table. Take it, or leave it. Before either Luke or Claire could respond, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Sheriff Reynolds' cruiser. Relief flooded through Claire as the sheriff approached, his expression grim when he spotted Michael. Mr. Moreno, he said coldly. I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome in Red Hollow. Michael turned, his charm instantly activated. Sheriff, just having a civil conversation with my wife and her friend. Ex-wife, Claire corrected yet again. There's nothing civil about violating a restraining order, the sheriff countered. Which is exactly what you're doing right now. Michael's smile faltered. What restraining order? That's a Kansas City jurisdiction, not here. Wrong, said another voice. Diane Keller, the lawyer, emerged from the sheriff's car. I filed the paperwork this morning. The restraining order has been recognized by this jurisdiction, effective immediately. You need to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Ms. Moreno at all times. Michael's facade began to crack. This is ridiculous. She's my wife. Claire, Luke, and the sheriff all said in unison. Ms. Keller approached, holding out an official-looking document. This is your copy of the order, Mr. Marino. I suggest you read it carefully. Violating it is a criminal offense. Michael snatched the paper, his eyes darkening with anger. This isn't over. None of this is over. Actually, Ms. Keller continued, there's more. I've been in touch with the Kansas City DA's office. They're very interested in pursuing those domestic violence charges you thought you'd escaped, and they're particularly interested in evidence of your collusion with Richard Vance to falsify legal documents. Michael's composure slipped completely. You can't prove anything. We'll see about that, the sheriff said. Now, you have two choices. Leave voluntarily, or I'll arrest you for violating the restraining order. Which will it be? For a tense moment, Claire thought Michael might choose arrest, might force a confrontation just to prove he still had some control. But self-preservation won out. Fine, he spat. I'm going. But don't think this is the end. For you, it is, Miss Keller said calmly. Between the restraining order, the pending criminal charges, and the evidence of document fraud we're gathering, you're looking at serious legal consequences. Mr. Moreno, I suggest you find a good criminal defense attorney. Michael's gaze locked on Claire, hatred burning in his eyes. You'll regret this. When you're alone again, when he gets tired of you, you'll regret choosing him over me. No, Claire said, her voice steady and clear. I will never regret leaving you. It was the best decision I ever made. Something in her tone, the absolute certainty, the complete absence of fear seemed to finally penetrate Michael's anger. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. Without another word, he turned and stalked back to his car, got in, and drove away. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Luke's arm slipped around her waist, steady and supportive. You okay? He asked softly. Claire nodded. Better than okay. Miss Keller approached them. I heard about the property dispute from Sheriff Reynolds. If what Mr. Moreno just implied is truth, that he helped falsify documents, that changes everything. But how do we prove it? Luke asked. My grandfather's copies of the original surveys are missing. There might be another way, the sheriff suggested. County records aren't the only place those boundaries would be documented. The state land office would have copies too. Miss Keller nodded. And if we can prove tampering with official records, both Vance and Mr. Moreno would face serious charges. Luke's expression lightened with hope. So we might be able to stop this before it even gets to court. Possibly, Ms. Keller cautioned. But we need evidence. Concrete proof that the documents were falsified. Claire thought about what Michael had said about her father allegedly working as a surveyor. It didn't make sense. Her father had been a farmer his whole life, as far as she knew. Unless... Wait, she said suddenly. My father's papers. After my parents died, I packed up all their documents. Michael insisted we store them at his office. I never went through everything. You think there might be something there that could help? Luke asked. Claire nodded slowly. If my father really did work as a surveyor, which I still don't believe, there might be records. And if Michael lied about that... then it supports our case that he helped falsify the property documents, Miss Keller finished. We need to get access to those papers. They're in Kansas City, Claire said. In Michael's office, storage. The sheriff frowned. That complicates things. We'd need a court order to access them, and that takes time. Maybe not, Miss Keller mused. If they're marital property, and if Claire's name is on the storage agreement... It is, Claire confirmed. Michael insisted everything be in both our names. Miss Keller smiled. Then you have every right to access those documents, and I think a trip to Kansas City might be in order. 2 days later, Claire found herself back in Kansas City, a place she'd sworn never to return to. Luke had insisted on coming with her, refusing to let her face this alone. Miss Keller accompanied them as well, her legal expertise proving invaluable. The storage facility was in the basement of Michael's office building. With Claire's ID and signature, they gained access without issue. The room was filled with boxes of accumulated papers and files. We're looking for anything related to my father, James Moreno, Claire explained as they began to search, or anything about surveys, property records, or land deeds. They worked methodically, going through box after box. Most contained mundane family document stacks, returns, insurance policies, old-school records. But in the back corner, Claire found a box labeled simply James' work. Inside were folders of papers, employment records, contracts, correspondence. Claire's hands trembled as she opened the first folder. My father did work for a surveying company, she said, her voice filled with wonder. I had no idea. Luke looked over her shoulder at the documents. It was before you were born, and just for a few years. He probably never mentioned it because it wasn't important to him. Claire nodded, continuing to sort through the papers. Most were routine employment documents, nothing that would help their case against Vance and Michael. And then she found a folder labeled Red Hollow County Surveys. 1983. This is it, she breathed, opening the folder with careful hands. Inside were survey maps, detailed notes, and official stamps from the county recorder's office, and they're clearly marked. Was the boundary between the Harrington farm and the Miller property exactly where Luke had said it was, with the creek forming the natural dividing line? Look, Claire said, pointing to her father's signature on the documents. He was the surveyor who mapped this area. These are the original documents. Ms. Keller examined the papers closely. These appear to be authentic, and they directly contradict the documents Vance presented. Luke's face broke into a smile of pure relief. This proves the land is mine. That Vance and Michael falsified records. It does more than that, Ms. Keller said, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. It proves conspiracy to commit fraud. Both Vance and Mr. Marino could face criminal charges. Claire felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a burden she'd carried for so long. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be free of it. It's over, she said softly. It's really over. Luke's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close. Let's go home, he said. Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, court appearances, and media attention. The story of how Richard Vance and Michael Marino had conspired to falsify property records made headlines in the county paper. Vance's investors pulled out of the resort project, leaving him financially devastated. Michael was arrested on multiple charges: violation of the restraining order, conspiracy to commit fraud, and the original domestic violence charges from Kansas City. Through it all, Claire and Luke stood together, supporting each other as the storm raged around them. On a warm summer evening, exactly 3 months after Claire had first arrived in Red Hollow, they sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sunset from their favorite rocking chairs. Martha lay between them, gray muzzle resting on her paws. Penny, for your thoughts, Luke said, watching Claire's contemplative expression. She smiled, looking out at the farm, at the fields ripening with summer crops, at the garden bursting with vegetables, at the flower beds she'd planted that now bloomed with color. I was just thinking about that first day, she said softly, sitting on your fence, not knowing where I was going to sleep that night. How far I've come since then. Luke reached across the space between them, taking her hand. In his, you've come far, but you've also come home. Claire squeezed his hand. Yes, I've come home. They rocked in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The legal battles were behind them. Michael was facing years in prison. Vance had left town in disgrace. The farm was secure, the boundaries officially confirmed by the county. I have something for you, Luke said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. I've been waiting for the right moment. He pulled out a small box, simple and unadorned. Claire's breath caught in her throat as he opened it, revealing a delicate silver ring with a small blue stone that matched her eyes. It was my mother's, Luke explained. Nothing fancy, but it meant the world to her. Just like you mean the world to me. Claire couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. I'm not asking for an answer right now, Luke continued gently. I know we've only known each other a few months. I know you're still healing, but I want you to have this as a promise. A promise that whenever you're ready, whether that's next month or next year, I'll be here, because I love you, Claire Moreno. I think I've loved you since that first day I saw you sitting on my fence. Tears filled Claire's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Luke Harrington, she said softly, I don't need more time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She held out her hand, and Luke slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I love you too, Claire whispered. You gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. You gave me strength when I thought I had none left. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what it felt like. Luke leaned across the space between their chairs and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and future and home. When they pulled apart, Claire looked down at the ring on her finger, then out at the farm stretching before them, the fields that had witnessed her arrival, her healing, her falling in love. What happens now? She asked, not in uncertainty but in wonder at the possibilities stretching before them. Luke smiled, his eyes reflecting the first evening stars. Now we plant something new, something that grows from us, not from what was left behind. Claire recognized her own words from months ago, spoken in the garden when she'd first begun to trust him. The fact that he remembered, that he treasured those words as she had treasured his kindness, filled her heart with joy. I'd like that, she said softly, to grow something new. Together, as darkness settled over the farm, they remained on the porch, making plans for their future, for expanding the vegetable garden, for renovating the old barn, for children someday running through the fields that had healed Claire's wounded heart. The healing fields, she thought. That's what this place had become for her. Not just a refuge, not just a hiding place, but truly a place of healing and growth and love. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't escaping. She was home, and in Luke's steady gaze, in his warm hand holding hers, in the quiet strength of his love, Claire knew that she had found not just safety, but the kind of happiness she had once thought was forever beyond her. Reach the past no longer defined her because she wasn't escaping anymore. She was home. The end.